In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I just have to share this with you because I've been smiling for the past 5 minutes and I read this awful reading, right? So I've got signs up there telling me, Mike, because I didn't have my mic on. So I'm sorry about this. This was an awful reading. And it's one of those readings that you get and it's your turn to preach and you say, I'd really like to go on vacation. Then we get somebody else to preach. It's hard. It's a good reading for the week that we've had in this world. But that second half is hard. And we're going to get to it. But I'm going to deal with the first half first. Give me time. So here we have Jesus speaking to the Pharisees. If you're not familiar with the term the Pharisees, I'm sure you have because it gets mentioned all the time, but the Pharisees were a group of Jews that in simple form, they were obsessed with right worship and right sacrifice. And as long as they worshiped correctly and they did everything that they needed to do to be clean and eat the right things and wash at the right times, and I don't know exactly what went into that, but I'm sure some of you might know that. As long as they did that, they felt they were right with God, that was enough. And here we have Jesus come in and say to them, it's not enough. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've been obsessed with something for all of your life, if that thing has taken up most of your life and worrying about it and worrying about doing it correctly has taken up every last moment of your time. When somebody says, yeah, that's not enough, you just want to say, get out. Just get out because I don't want to hear it. But what Jesus was trying to tell them was that it wasn't just important that they worship, and we know that today. It is important that we worship. It's also important that we go out into the world, and when we do that, we show the love of God. In everything that we do, in every word that comes out of our mouth, in our actions, in everything that we do. We come here on Sunday because we love this place, because we love God, and we want to worship him, and we want to worship him in community. But the fact is that you could have chosen another place to do that. You could have gone down the street. I don't know Coral Springs very well, but from what I crossed like 3 or 4 churches to get here. So I know that there are other places for you to go. And please know that I'm not sending you anywhere, please. When Mark comes back, I want you all to be here. But we all do have a choice. And we can even worship God from our homes if we wanted to. We're being live streamed, so we could sit at home and watch it on our computers. But worship is not the most important thing. We come here because we're a community. A community of Christians who know that loving each other is one of the most important things in our life, only superseded by our love for God. Because in community is how we love God the best. How hard is it to love a God that we've never seen? To love a God that we never hear. But it becomes easier when we love the God whose creation we live among. When we can see the face of Christ in each other, when we can see the face of Christ in everything that surrounds us. That is an easier thing to do in community. And that is the most important thing. Loving each other is easy in here because we know each other. I've even been here, like a month, and I already love you guys, and I'm hoping that it's reciprocal, but you sure just yet? It's easy to love people when you're with them day in and day out, when your beliefs and your principles are basically the same, when we're of the same frame of mind. But as you've seen this week, loving the people out there is not so easy, especially when those people are attacking you. and saying that you're less than human because you're not of a certain color, of a certain race. That's the hard part. I have a friend, last week I talked about a friend from seminary too, but all of this that's happening in the world it hasn't touched our doorstep just yet. It's happening in other places, and I'm hoping that it doesn't spread, but it may end up on our doorstep at some point. This friend that is up in Charlottesville, she posted on Facebook that she thought, wouldn't it be great that if instead of greeting hate and violence with more hate and violence, wouldn't it be great if we met it with love? Wouldn't it be great, and her example was, wouldn't it be great if when the neo-Nazis decided that they wanted to protest and do a march in some town square, that we did a parade or a big festival? There are a lot more of us than there are of them. Our noise, our wonderful noise of happiness and jubilation would drown out their cries for death and destruction. We would crowd out those people, and their noise wouldn't be heard. And what you would hear would be the noise of laughter and of love. That would be a perfect way to combat that noise that's happening up in Charlottesville, Boston, and all other places protesting at the moment. I know in Germany, in Germany, there's a town that greets the Nazi protest with a march, you know, like one of those marches that they do here for raising funds for diabetes or for heart disease. They decide that for every mile that a neo-Nazi walks, we will donate a certain amount of money to an anti-neo-Nazi group. Guess what? They don't want to march anymore. That is way more effective than beating them on the head. Because when we greet them with violence and with hate, we're no better than they are. We're as hateful as they are. And that is easier to say than to do, to love somebody when they're hating you. But that is what Jesus calls us to do. Nevertheless, we have the second half of the reading, where Jesus is approached by this woman, a Canaanite woman. Now, if you remember the Canaanites from the story of the Exodus, God promised his people that he would have a place for them to go, the promised land. And he told Moses that he would get there and he would see it, but he would not step on that ground. And eventually Joshua is the one that took charge and marched into that land and took it over. But the Canaanites were the people who were residing in that land. So they, at some point, were the enemies of the Jews, ethnically and racially probably different than the Jews, people that the Jews probably did not associate with. And on top of that, this woman who is coming to speak to him is a woman. That isn't done. A woman in those times wouldn't speak to a man if she was alone. But she doesn't just speak to him, she comes and she yells. And she's frantic because her child is ill. She says that she has a demon. Probably means that she was ill. The disciples even tell him, you need to ignore her, just keep going, forget her. This is not somebody you want to talk to. And at first, Jesus even complies and ignores her. Now, that's not the Jesus that I think of when I'm here worshiping. When I think of Jesus at all I can think of is love and compassion and mercy. But here we have this Jesus that even calls her a dog. Now, some people have said that that was a term used back then for people who were not um, who are not of the Jewish faith. I don't know. I don't know about that. I've heard that before. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't want to excuse what happened at that moment, even though I'm speaking about Jesus. Because we tend to forget that Jesus, even though fully divine, was also a human being. This is one of those instances when he was the one that was reminded that the most important thing that we do is to love our neighbor. And it is the Canaanite woman who reminds him of that. That sometimes is hard to accept because we think of Jesus as the perfect being. It is for me, and it's hard to preach on, and I know it's hard to hear. Maybe it was a moment that he used to educate his disciples, maybe, but that's not what it says in the reading. We have what we have, and we have to do with that what we should. So in that moment, when his humanity was telling him to ignore this woman, he was reminded that she also is a child of God. That although he came to this world as a Jew, and for the people of God, for the chosen people of God, that love, that sacrifice that he would eventually make would stretch out to include all of us. And so then that would mean that we are the adopted children here in this story. We were not the Jewish people, or at least most of us were not. We are adopted by Christ and accepted as his own. And he stretched out his arms on that cross for every single one of us. But that was a gift given to us as adopted children, and therefore we have no right to deny it to others. Say what they say, march where they march, destroy what they destroy, doesn't matter. It isn't ours to give. It is given by God. The gift of Christ was given by God for all of us, and we have no right to deny it. That is hard. When you encounter someone who only feels hate for the other. But that is the job that we have in front of us. That is what we promised to do when we were baptized. We would reject evil, but we would also fill our hearts with love, love of God and love of neighbor. And we would follow in the example of Christ in this world. And to do that, we have to do the hard parts too, not just the easy parts of coming in here and loving each other. We have to go out there and love those people out there. So as we do that this week, and as we see the hate going on in this world, and we hear people say things that they shouldn't, or people not say enough of what they should say, remember that it is up to us, not just to say the right things and to come here and worship, but to go out there and say those things out there. And not only that, but it is not enough to say them. We must act them out there. That love that we profess for God and his creation only works if we act that out in the world, because we are the hands and feet of Christ here in this world. And praying is wonderful, and we can do that all day. We can come to church on Sunday, we can come to church every Sunday, and we can pray. But we also have to use our hands and our feet to help our brothers and sisters, to love our brothers and sisters, and do the work that Jesus would do had he been here to do it himself. If he had hands and feet here in this world, he would be doing what we need to be doing now. So we are charged with that job now. All of us, every single one of us, no matter what our color, what our race, what our gender is, what our religion is. It is our job as children of God to protect each other and to love each other. Amen.